Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Welcome back to another episode of the InterDrone Podcast, your 30,000-foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith with the InterDrone team, joined today with Michael Pehel, chairman of InterDrone, and we have our guest today, Ernest Huffman. He is the principal transportation planner for the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I'm really excited to have him on. He's also an InterDrone speaker, and it'd be great to get some of his insight into some of the work that he's doing down there in Texas, how they're embracing drone technology and integrating this at a government level. So, Ernest, thanks again for being here. If you could just give the audience a brief overview about yourself and some of the work that you do with drones and UAS, and maybe a brief overview about how your career took you into the drone space.
Okay, so like you mentioned, I manage the Aviation Department for North Central Texas Council of Governments. I actually just got promoted to airport or aviation planning and education program manager. So my title's just changed last week.
Sorry for that. Congratulations.
Thank you. But I manage numerous aviation transportation projects through the COG. I have aviation planning, which encompasses all the general aviation airports and making sure they have the transportation infrastructure they need to thrive in the DFW Metroplex. I also run an aviation career website where we do outreach to all the schools from grade school all the way up to university level on aviation careers and how kids can take advantage of that. Cool. Also, and then that's what leads me here, is I lead our North Texas UAS Safety and Integration Task Force, which is comprised of 260 stakeholders in the region, 130 plus organizations, and we're all working towards efficiently and safely integrating drone technology into the Metroplex. And we're taking a holistic approach. So we're integrating from all levels, starting from public safety in the classroom all the way to UAM and air taxi levels.
Very cool. Sounds like you're herding a lot of cats there.
Yeah, a lot of cats, and I'm working on getting some staff. Currently, it's just me and my boss is working this.
And so the task force, you said the Metroplex, is that Dallas specific or?
DFW, so the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. It encompasses 16 counties in that area.
Great. And how many of the counties have government agencies that are currently using drones or some type of unmanned systems?
So I can't speak from a county perspective, but from a municipality perspective, there may be 50 to probably 55 municipalities using drones to some extent, mostly in public safety.
Great. And
I'll get into, we have a public safety unmanned response team and committee here, and I'll get into that later when you ask me some questions about that. But that's a group and organization that brings all those municipalities together to standardize their efforts.
Right, learn from each other. Well, great. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the work that you're doing. I know Dallas-Fort Worth area is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country, so getting that whole Metroplex up on board with drones and UAS is no small feat. So if anyone's tuning into the podcast for the first time, the format, we talk about a couple of news stories from the past week, and then we jump into the interview portion with our guest, where we'll ask Ernest a number of questions about some of the work that he's doing. So without further ado, timely article from dronelife.com. So drones for this hurricane season, states are getting ready. Before we started recording, we just talked about offline about Hurricane Isaias and the damage it did up in the Northeast. Mike even lost his power last week on a podcast recording. So I thought this article was interesting and timely. DroneLife.com, they highlighted a few of the top insights that agencies experienced in the process from going through some of these experiences, notably coordination, safety and airspace awareness, preparing your team in advance, coordinating with federal agencies. Ernest, what were some of your takeaways from this article? I mean, I know Dallas isn't right on the coast, but Houston obviously had some run-ins with storms last year. I mean, I think last year was, I could be wrong with the stats, but one of the worst years on record for hurricanes. So something seems to be happening, and how can we get the most out of this technology to kind of educate, to bring awareness, to potentially save lives when storms like this and other natural disasters occur?
So from my perspective, the state of Texas, we had our run-in with this issue with Hurricane Harvey. It might have been 2 years ago, and it was a devastating event that happened downstate. And we had a plethora of drone-related agencies that responded to that particular incident. And there were a lot of lessons learned from that. And one of the things that came out of it is the state of Texas put together a Texas Disaster Emergency Management Task Force around this particular issue. And what they're working at currently is galvanizing various state entities to come together with a coordinated effort for these in the future. Our particular region has been leading the effort in that because of our, as I previously mentioned, our public safety unmanned response team. This group and this organization, they train together for incidents like this. They certify together, and they do standardize and training around the region for those particular things. They've also been able to get a public safety unmanned response team in Austin and Houston, and they all work to do the same thing. So they have a regional sky boss for these incidents. Because of Hurricane Harvey, the state of Texas is starting to invest money into an effort in these efforts because of Hurricane Harvey, and we think majority of the states in the nation need to do similar things.
Right. Yeah, I remember Harvey because it affected InterDrone. We had I want to say 10 to 15% of the pilots, probably the most trained pilots, actually left to go help out in that effort. I remember the FAA kind of pulling up some of the restrictions at that time and then giving softer guidance, but allowing the state to actually, utilize drones in the rescue efforts in merely just assessing the damage. And, it was kind of for me, a very big moment for realizing this is not just a tech show that I'm a part of. This is actually something that is fundamentally changing the way humans interact with the world and what we can do for each other.
Right. It's more than taking videos or taking cool photos. You're really changing and saving lives potentially. So when it comes to a hurricane or tropical storm, what are the different use cases for drones? I mean, because there's obviously pre a storm hitting, right? So you can get out, maybe take photos, see where the storm's coming, maybe measure wind speed. And then there's also post storm, like you were just alluding to, Mike, right? There's search and rescue. There's, 3D modeling and kind of creating a 3D replica of a scene where then first responders can go in and bring help. I mean, what are some of the use cases across?
Well, I think modeling would probably be used more for damage assessment than than creating a map at the scene. But that's one of kind of the largest things, especially if you're mapping the area ahead of time, and then then you map it post flood. You could get an idea of the level that the water rose. Mm-hmm. You could get an idea of just what you're going to be looking at in terms of insurance claims and numbers, and the literally millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars in an area of damage that's been done by the storm winds.
Right. You can I know in instances like in New Orleans, you can assess damage on the levees. You can find where the breaks occurred. In most cases, you can prevent breaks by doing some assessments during these storms.
Wow. Yeah, I used to live actually in New Orleans post Katrina, but that's a city that every hurricane season they're kind of dealing with potentials of something serious. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just great to see government agencies innovating, embracing new technology in an attempt to prevent damage and potentially save lives. So great work to anybody that's taking advantage of this technology right now. I want to shift gears to our second article. So police using drones, drone responders releases principles on responsible drone use. So I think this is extremely timely, with all the kind of the tensions going on between law enforcement and citizens right now. During some of the protests, we've seen drones flying around, which have, been met with very mixed response from the public and usually negative response. And so drone responders, they're a nonprofit program that helps first responders, public safety, and emergency management professionals implement this technology. Charles Werner is a good friend of the show, and he speaks at our events and even has done a couple webinars with us. So we really respect that kind of the guidance that they're giving. And so they've released what they're calling the 5 C's to make it easier for police using drones to address critical community concerns. So number 1, community engagement and transparency. 2, civil liberties, privacy and protection. 3 is common operating procedures. 4 is clear oversight and accountability. And the 5th would be cybersecurity. So a question for either of you, what are some of the biggest challenges when implementing a drone program for a government agency? Do we need to standardize what that looks like? I mean, it seems like, Ernest, you are helping standardize that in kind of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Mm-hmm. How important is it to standardize that, or to have that task force, like you're saying, to really kind of integrate this technology sustainably and responsibly?
So from my perspective, I think it needs to be standardized. The main issue that a lot of the law enforcement entities have been having is they've been trying to start their programs on their own, and they've been trying. They're not as aware of. Can you still hear me? Because I feel like my Bluetooth went out.
It kicked out for a second.
You're back. You're back.
Sorry about that. I heard it click off, and I apologize for the echo.
No problem.
But they've been having to start these programs on their own without any assistance. And a lot of the times they don't have any institutional knowledge around the platform. So standardization and collaboration with other entities in your region is a must. It saves you money, it saves you time, and it also makes sure you learn from other people's mistakes when you collaborate in that effort. And that's what we're doing in our region. But to talk about that drone responders article in the 5 C's, I think that's a great start. It's something that's needed. But what I would like to see from that particular group is some more concrete language on some things you won't do with the drone technology, and that's what the communities would like to see, and that's what we're working towards in our particular region. In particular, I think we're going to be looking at getting legislation that prohibits police and law enforcement to weaponize drones in any way. In the future, we know that the FAA currently doesn't allow that, but that might change in the future. We want to nip that in the bud early. Mm-hmm. From a public engagement perspective, a lot of the police departments don't have the resources to engage on the public on most topics, let alone drones. So there's going to need to be some financial. Some supplemental funds, or some funding has to come from either the state or the federal government to assist law enforcement to do that. It's a new technology platform, and they're going to need money to help share the language and the do's and don'ts with the platform. Did I get to all your questions? Sorry.
Yeah. And so we have some friends in Illinois who've worked with the MABUS program. So that would be for fire departments to be able to share assets. And I find that kind of model interesting. Is there anything similar for law enforcement, or is each department really kind of an island under their own, budget-wise, resources-wise?
Yeah.
Do you have any insights there?
For the most part, sometimes the COG will have funds for various programming and software that we'll make available. Other entities may have funding available. But until that PSER group came together, they were all doing their own things. In particular, the city of Mansfield was one of the foremost leaders in this platform, if you DJI Airworks or any of the major conferences, you'll have one of our guys in our region doing those presentations on what they're doing in law enforcement. But majority of these guys came up with the background on this on their own. They're sharing it now with the others and want to continue to do so around the nation.
Right.
Yeah, it's been a very ground up process. And, it's funny, you hear people call for standards like you've called and called for. And I've seen people make some standards, but the kind of hardest piece of the puzzle is acceptance of the standards, right? And getting everybody to actually come into a room and agree, yes, we agree on what these words on paper mean and how they'll actually be implemented, and work through how they can be interpreted to make sure that these standards actually are like applicable to the real world situations and the different kind of environments that they'll be deployed in. So that last mile is hard. Yeah,
well, the main issue is there aren't any centers of gravity for the industry in most regions of the country. So there's nothing drawing these forces together. I think we've been doing a good job of doing that here, and elsewhere they've been doing that, but other folks need to start doing it in order to utilize the platform correctly.
Right. I think what you said is really important too. You said we want to standardize how to implement and what we should be and can be doing with this technology, but we also need to sort of standardize what government agencies, law enforcement especially, shouldn't be doing. And Mike and I, New York City residents, I can't remember I think she was a congresswoman, but she was putting forth a piece of legislation that said drones should not be able to should not be able to use any facial recognition, should not be able to be used during the protests that are going on. And, that's really, I think, top of people's mind right now a little bit for common citizens. I think trust in law enforcement is at an all-time low. So implementing something like this, especially if it has potential to be used for overreach, is going to really set this technology in the hands of law enforcement back, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity for it. And if we don't do it well, it could really be met with poor public perception and no embrace from kind of the broader public, even though there are a lot of the benefits that we all agree on.
To add some kind of detail to what CJ is saying about the congresswoman or the legislator, I don't remember what rank she was. The facial recognition issue, that seems like treating like the endpoint, like attacking the technology, attacking the wheel or the gun rather than how does it get into the hands of a person, how is it utilized, and creating restrictions from there out. And we made the point on that podcast, or maybe Patrick Sherman did, I believe, that, you have to make the distinction between a drone and a camera on a pole. If the exact same thing could be achieved on a camera on a high pole and you wouldn't restrict that on facial recognition, why would you restrict it on the drone? But determining when and where facial recognition can be used by law enforcement and how they treat that data, I find that kind of more important, I think.
Right. Facial recognition is not unique to drones. It's something that would need to be addressed across the entire agency.
Any instincts on that, Ernest?
No. My main thing is with any policy developed around this industry, I think we have to have a thoughtful approach. No quick reactions, no reacting to public pressure. We actually really need to sit down, review the pros and cons of any policy, our intention, and what that will look like in the future once that policy is enacted. So anytime I hear anything about that kind of deal, we're prohibiting the use of drones for various things, I always ask how much thought was given to that, because just like you guys mentioned, prohibiting drones for being able to capture facial or use facial recognition technology, then you prohibit anti-terrorist organizations from being able to do it in those situations, right? When you create blanket policy like that. I just think we need to remain thoughtful. But currently, the public's worried about that kind of deal. We just need to get out in front of the public and educate them and speak to them about what drones are actually being used for, not what they're not. Because I don't know too many agencies that are even using drones for facial recognition anyway. So.
Right. So there's a lot of kind of cart before the horse there. And you kind of see like a technology kind of abstraction in a person's head when they talk about it. You could tell that they haven't been familiarized with the technology, or otherwise they wouldn't think that about it. So that's a failure on my part. That's a failure on the drone community's part to actually get that information outside of our inner circles. But to your point, I think the most important thing in this article is that transparency piece.
Yeah.
Because without transparency, we get into kind of bad situations like we got with, I think it was Connecticut, CJ, where they were using the drone to actually yell at people the same way you would do in a helicopter.
Social distancing.
Yeah, for social distancing. But, fundamentally, it's two different platforms, and the way that people perceive that versus, a bullhorn from a helicopter was vastly different. And the truth is, you wouldn't deploy a helicopter for something as mundane as asking people to stand a few feet apart. So it did feel like a new invasion of space, and ultimately the public cried back on that department, and they had to shut that program down.
Really? So they were upset that the drones were yelling at them.
Yeah.
The public.
To social distance. They would have preferred a human being to tell them to. And I think there's something to that, though. If the medium is the message, right? So if the public is saying, I don't want drones for this use, and the safety benefit, and in that case it was nebulous, like we didn't know enough about the level of contagion, how much social distancing worked. It's our best guess at that point, right? There just wasn't enough there for the legislator, when questioned by the public, to say no, we believe in this. They just couldn't do in the way that they can, where a drone is used for a search and rescue operation, or like you said, what if we had Miriam McNabb and she was talking about the Boston bombing? What if we were using facial recognition to track that suspect throughout the city? We would probably all be okay with that use case, but this one seemed to kind of just rub up against the wrong social mores. And because the department didn't go out there and say we were using it for this use case, it became a shock, which made the reaction even worse, I think.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, the probability is high that was the public's first introduction to their police department using drones.
Right.
For anything, for any reason. And we were very thoughtful about that here, as we were trying to introduce the platform to the public and all their uses, and we're developing programs and marketing strategies around that. I think in order to have successful programs and to remove that type of backlash when you really need to use drones for this type of deal, things that, in other countries they don't have to worry about, because you've already established that connection with your community. And we have to do that elsewhere too.
Yeah, I think, you said it, literally implementing a marketing plan for the integration of drones and how the government's going to be using them. It's kind of funny to think about, just because I do marketing.
Right, you're on a phone call with marketers right now.
Yeah, I just wouldn't have thought about that, but it makes a ton of sense. How else are you going to educate and create kind of that trust and that positive perception and open-mindedness?
As a New Yorker, if you see something, say something, right? That is burned into the back of your head. That was marketing. Yeah. That's why we know it. So there's certain kind of public programs that are important. It's funny, like in marketing, we would never use the word don't, but you see this actually, I think, incorrectly implemented by law enforcement a lot. Like, don't do drugs. That's almost an advertisement, do drugs, because the negative doesn't set in as fast. We just hear the word drugs. So,
although I beg to differ, that DARE campaign worked on me, and a lot of my peers. We did not do drugs because of Officer Friendly came to school, and then they had the the omelet, your brain on drugs commercial, that worked for me.
Brain on drugs worked on me.
Frying pan. Yeah.
But that's a positive. So this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. I don't want that to happen to my brain. I mean, that one was brilliant, to be honest. That and the original Truth campaign for cigarettes, like showing statistics, but like blown out in real life, like with bigger objects. That was really resonant. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole kind of culture of information that goes through that, to have it so pervasive that every citizen is able to kind of repeat it. That takes effort. And like you said, there's probably not that much funding around drone programs at that level because it's still very nascent as far as implementation and technology wise.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the other thing, I think that a positive benefit from doing a campaign like that is you will kind of open younger kids' minds up to this technology, and they may be more interested to learn about it. I mean, Ernest, you talked earlier about that you're involved with some of the education that's going on in Texas for students of all different ages, and how important that is. So kind of debunking myths and making this not seem like a foreign UFO flying in the sky, but people knowing what it is and what's possible with it and what it's doing will kind of ripple throughout multiple kind of generations of people, and ideally just make a more sustainable industry. On that note, I really want to quickly just touch on something. So I didn't send this article to you guys, but the FAA awarded $3.3 million to 7 American universities to advance their drone research. So the bulk of the funding going to Mississippi State University, about $1.3 million, University of Alabama in Huntsville, about $1.1 million. And then the other 5 listed were New Mexico State University, University of Alaska Fairbanks, Mississippi State, North Carolina State, and Oregon State. At a high level, what is this? How exciting is it for you guys to see something like this? The FAA actually awarding significant money to universities kind of across the country.
Well, for me, first of all, there weren't any of my region schools on that list, and so we got the University of Dallas, we have the University of Texas at Arlington, we have University of North Texas. All of those institutions, and SMU are heavily involved in drone-related research and development. So I'm really interested to know what the process was. Was there an application? Yeah, what were the criteria? Was there an application process, or how'd that work out? So that's just my first inclination when I hear that. It's like, how weren't we involved with this? But to answer your main question, I think is a great thing. I think federal investment in the platform needs to happen. I don't think enough of it has happened. They're relying way too much, I think, on private entities to do the investments, and I think that's slowing us up. Where other countries are bypassing us on a lot of these metrics, and we need to get it together. So I think that's the first start. I think more investment needs to come, and we're going to push for that, and we hope the rest of the industry does as well.
What was interesting was going to Europe last year, and I was saying exactly what you were saying. Like, there's just not enough money into it. We need more testing going on at the test sites. We need clearer standards for what the FAA is actually looking for. Actually, that part is probably true regardless. But I think it was Kevin Satori from Auterion who said, yeah, but there's so much more money going into it in the States. And when I looked at it, he's right in total. But when you look at it like per our population, how much money? Not as much. Per test site, we spread ourselves so thin, I think, in a lot of ways, that we didn't even get results. Most of the test sites weren't even used, or not most. A portion of the test sites weren't used. So that's a lot of funding going to nowhere, right? So, question is, why aren't they calling Ernest up? And more people like him who have on the ground programs, and then, figuring out from the ground up where we should be putting this money.
Right.
No, I think so. I mean, I think you guys are going to learn through this conversation. I'm starting to think of this thing from a nationalist perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what InterDrone's thoughts are on it, but I'm really all about American investment, building American industry, American workforce development, that kind of deal. And without government investment, I don't want them to run any of the programs, to be honest with you. I just want them to invest in folks who can.
Well, we had Gokul on from robots.experts last week, and he was talking, because I get itchy when I hear about the government kind of picking a winner, right? I don't think that should be the way it should be. We didn't go into an exact American example, but I have more than a few. I mean, if you look at the railroad system, Grant did the I think it was like a great contest between the two major railroad companies to try and see who could meet this middle point in the country first, right? And they mapped it out and they said, okay, these people got to go through mountains. These people are going straight line. Where should we count meeting in the middle? And because of that, we had the national railroad that stretched from coast to coast, and we had similar projects with the interstate highway system to get things going. So I'm not opposed to state funding, that's for sure. I just think there's the focus is too much on blocking China based on a perceived security threat, when I think the actual threat is it can be assessed completely from a positive angle of we should invest in our own infrastructure for our own safety. And for me, the greatest example of that was the failure to have the quantities of PPP we needed when this crisis hit with COVID. And that just says, okay, that regardless of which country is able to produce goods the cheapest throughout the world, we should still take a priority we should still look into figuring out which pieces of technology, which goods and services that we need to have a minimum viable kind of American industry to support in case of a crisis. And if you work from security outwards, I think you get to all the same places, but without the paranoia.
Interesting.
No, I agree. That's a perfect assessment. And I think the government is doing a bit of that. They just had a solicitation to get defense manufacturing communities designated, where they're designating areas in the country where they have a defense manufacturing base, and they want to focus on developing more of that, right? But the same has to go, I think, with almost every developing industry. You got automated vehicle, you have ours, you got things like the Hyperloop. We need more American skilled workers doing this work, or else we're going to end up like Rome, right? You forget how to do things and you have to hire out to do it. It used to be where our American consultants will go to China to get them to teach them how to set up their manufacturing industry. Now it's going to get to the point where we're going to have to hire them to come over and do it.
Yeah, we're a very service-based economy, and there's economic advantages to that. I mean, sometimes it seems like we can make money out of thin air in certain industries. I mean, who knows what's keeping Uber alive except the stock market? So, because it doesn't make money, right? It's one of the strangest companies on the planet because of that. Mm-hmm. But your point is totally taken. That if we don't have skilled labor here, or even unskilled labor, hands willing to do the work, I think that's somewhat a lie, that people don't want to have those types of jobs here. Those jobs just aren't available at the prices that companies want to pay them. And, if there was some investment, if there was tariffs set up the right way, some of these problems might at least be able to be mediated, so we're more secure on an infrastructure standpoint.
Correct.
It's not an easy riddle to solve,
Not at all.
But I do think it's not something you could just throw your hands up and give up on. And I think that seemed to be kind of the culture for probably the late 70s on to now, of just let capitalism run it, the market will figure it out. The problem is we're reaching a tragedy of the commons point where there's just nothing left because we outsourced it all.
Yep.
Right. Which works when everything is working, but when you need something that you can't control, that's when the pain points really stand out and really become painful, like what we just went through with the pandemic.
Yeah, physical production of things matters, and access to resources to produce those matter, as much as we want to pretend like they don't. They do when the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
No, that's what matters the most.
Yeah.
And historically, that's been the case, and we're learning that today. Again, we're learning lessons that should have already been learned.
Right. Well, guys, want to switch gears just a little bit. We're going to jump into the interview portion. So, Ernest, we kind of gave a brief overview of your career, and you did as well at the very beginning of the podcast. But talk a little bit more about NCTCOG. What's top of mind for you kind of right now, and as we move into the second half, or I guess we're already in the second half of 2020, as we move into early 21, and how your career took you into aviation and drones.
Okay, so like I said, I work for North Central Texas Council of Governments. We are a metropolitan planning organization and a council of government. So we handle all the surface transportation planning for the DFW region, that's 16 counties, and we're the council of governments, which it houses, we have various committees that are represented by all of the cities that have a population of 50,000+ people in our Metroplex. And the majority of those committees are headed up by the city mayors, city managers, et cetera, where we talk about the allocation of various transportation funds that are regionally allocated. And it's to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. My focus is the aviation planning piece. So like I mentioned earlier, I work with all the airports, and it's morphed into probably something that's never been, where I'm now working with the aviation industry to make sure that their needs and their growth needs are met within the region. And I try to focus from the transportation angle of things. My career, I never was a drone guy. Before I moved down here to Dallas, I didn't know anything about drones. So I started out as an airport planner / aviation economist, where I worked for a consulting firm in the DC area, doing airport planning, doing forecasts, master plans, things of that nature. Then I moved on to Chicago, where I still did that work. 50% of my work was that, and another 50% was as an airline technical representative consultant, where me and my boss essentially managed the airport design and construction activities on the O'Hare modernization program from the airline. So the airlines funded it. Me and my boss, we managed that funding and all the requisite projects. And I also got an opportunity to get into the aviation education piece, where I joined the board of directors for this group called Tuskegee Next, where we took kids from the inner city of Chicago, really smart, high-level achievers, and they wanted to join the aviation rank. So we got them their private pilot's license in the summer. We did awesome. That. And that program's still going on up in Chicago. It's an amazing program. You guys want to learn more about that, I'll shoot you some information. Great program.
Yeah, please send a link so we could put it in the show notes.
We'll do. It's Tuskegee Next is the name of it. So that got my hackles up on education, and because during that program, my main job was to teach the kids about the different aviation careers outside of being a pilot. So I get them every Saturday and teach them about a new career trajectory outside of being a pilot. Because just like them, I thought I was going to be a pilot. Decided and ended up not being one. So I wanted to make sure they learned from my mistake. So when I got the opportunity to come down here to run this aviation program, one of the huge components was aviation education, and I jumped at that opportunity. The drones angle didn't come about till I got down here. I would get emails from people I thought were crazy, asking me what was I going to be doing about drones flying around their houses. And in Chicago, it never was a discussion. There was never a discussion about drones. I don't even recall hearing anything about drones before I got down here. And then as a member of the DFW Aerospace Consortium, which is our regional aviation manufacturing consortium, we work on workforce development and planning. A couple of the guys there own drone companies, and they would keep telling me, the drone industry, that's the next page in aviation's history. No one's grabbing the baton with this. DFW region has all the gravitas to do so. What do you need? What can you do about it? I thought they were crazy too, because I didn't care. But then our airport started complaining about drones flying in and around the air and around their airspace, and that's when I started to care. They asked, "What can we do?" So we started working on a model ordinance for the region, trying to govern where drones take off and land recreationally in the area, to try to counteract some of that, mitigate some of that reckless activity. But then the state of Texas outlawed our ability, or our municipality's ability, to draft local ordinance on drone technology. So they prohibited that completely. Had to go to the drawing board. Okay, so how can I assist my airports? And now I'm more educated on the issue in our region. There wasn't any collaboration. There are disparate pieces all over the region doing things, tons of great things, but no one's talking to each other and working together. As a council of governments, I got every city in my region's ears, up to the mayor. As a NPO, I have all the airports, all their managers, all their staff. They'll listen to me. Now all I need to do, I got the manufacturing industry, from the consortium side of things. The education piece, I know all the players at the aviation, the universities, and what they're doing. That's when I developed the task force idea to bring everything together. We started that in 2018 with maybe about 40 individuals that I could draw together. And now, as I mentioned earlier, we're up to 250 or 260 plus with 140 plus organizations. Now, we have 4 working groups in there where we work on the day-to-day or in the details of the programming for the task force. We have a public awareness and education one where we work on the general education of the platform to the public, the marketing promotion of the industry to the public, as well as safety guidelines. We promote Know Before You Fly Your Drones. We have an ongoing workshop that we're converting to digital platform now, where we hired a consultant to teach our region's residents on where you can fly safely, where you can get training, where you can buy a safe drone, where you can get your drone maintenance at, what careers can you get into if you wanted to from the drone perspective. So we're starting to do that. We have a legislative group where we look at policy together, state policy. We've got 2 state bills going up in the 2021 session. We comment as a group on the federal notice for rulemaking and federal rules and things of that nature. We comment as a group. So we're doing that in the legislative piece. We have a training group where we look at all training from grade school, standardization of training from grade school all the way up to the professional levels, where we help support the first Department of Labor's apprenticeship program that they funded at Dallas County Community College, where they paid people to learn to become professional drone pilots. A great program. And we've worked on grants and assisted in grant applications to the City of Fort Worth School District, and there's 10 other school districts. They came together to go after this grant, and now they won the grant up to $1.7 million, and they're getting drones in all of their schools now. Drones,
that's fantastic.
Programming. We're working with all the drone, and this is all under the training, all the drone related competitions. So the Bell Aerial robotics competition was huge here in our region. We're working with them. Our PSERT group, obviously, that I mentioned earlier, and others in the training. And last but not least is our integration working group, where we're looking at integrating the technology platform at all levels, from city use up into air taxi, et cetera. Any questions on those specific pieces? I know I rambled.
I was going to say, I have about 5 questions.
Sorry about that.
No, that was great. So the NPRM, can you any insight into what you guys commented and like some of your thoughts on the notice?
Which one?
The remote ID.
So the remote ID, I can't speak to any specific comments, because we took a list of everyone's comments, and I just standardized the format in which we submitted. So I didn't govern anybody's comments. I wanted everybody to be open. But what we did was we provided the framework. We made sure everybody, if you had an issue that you were presenting or that you wanted to complain about with the NPRM, also offer up a solution, because everyone's going to have an issue, but they're looking for viable solutions to these issues. They probably know what the issues are, but they want to know some good solutions from you. So we made sure they did that. And that's what we tried to do as a group.
On the remote ID front, though, what are your personal issues that you'd like to see kind of resolved when the actual rule comes down?
See, because I'm not a pilot, I'm not into. I just want there to be a rule that allows folks to operate remotely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You just want.
I just need it to exist. So,
right. So
our stakeholders no longer have to waste money on developing platforms that they can't use.
Mm-hmm. You seem like one of the most kind of intense people as far as setting up structures for other people to succeed. I find it kind of phenomenal that you could be a part of kind of all of these efforts, but I
don't have a stake in the fight. I just want my region to be supreme in aviation, right? And any way I can help, that's why I'm here.
So you mentioned 2 bills coming up, I think, in early 2021 session in your region. Can you talk about what those are and maybe your high-level thoughts on them?
Yep. So these are 2 Texas state bills. The first one is we're trying to get military facilities added on the critical infrastructure list on our drone bill. So we have a list of critical infrastructure that folks aren't allowed to fly over unless they get permission. Military facilities aren't on that list, so we're getting that added because we have numerous military facilities, and obviously we think from national security reasons you shouldn't be able to land your drone on a runway where F-16s take off and land.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
And that's happened. So
sure.
we're trying to get that nipped in the bud, and then we're also trying to get a bill that adds 911 on our 911 departments onto our public safety exemption list, where they because the public safety and law enforcement gets certain restrictions lifted when they need to fly over houses or take certain. Our 911 doesn't have that. Our 911 department is currently embarking on an effort to digitally map, 3D map the inside of all of our government-owned buildings. In particular, they're starting with schools, and they want to be able to use that information, obviously, to enhance emergency response efforts.
Active shooter situations, yes. Right? That's like the biggest concern. And then also in public buildings, bombers or hostage takers, right?
Yep. And they're also going through the effort to map out communities that aren't new communities that don't have houses yet, newly developed communities that aren't on the Google Maps yet because there aren't too many houses built yet, to get those in the system early so they can respond before there's actually a map. So folks on the ground know what's going on. So those are the 2 bills we currently have, and we're going to work on more in the future.
Very cool. And one more question. This was I know this a couple of years ago, probably you said that you guys as a region were passing. It wasn't real legislature, but you were passing city ordinances, I think, so that people couldn't fly their drones maybe near airports. And then the state came down and said you're no longer able to pass ordinances. Can you talk a little bit more about that and maybe why the state did that and how you're kind of trying to get the same things accomplished without being able to pass your own ordinances?
Yeah, was that a result of like a federal kind of slapdown?
No, it wasn't. So what we were doing was developing a model ordinance that any city could look at and develop, switch your name out, switch out specifics to your city, and utilize it as city policy. I personally think, and I didn't get any confirmation from the state why they did this. Obviously, actually, the legislator member who did that, he's no longer even in state. He's no longer here. So, but I think they're doing it just to make sure that there weren't a lot of fractionalized laws, which I understand.
Makes sense.
Which I don't have a problem with. The reason why we had to do something because the state wasn't. So
that's why I was asking, because there was kind of like a through line where there were people who believed in, I guess, almost a states' rights for aviation when it came to drones. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, commercial aviation could be run by the federal government, but drones should be run state to state because each state understands its airspace. And I think that's kind of been pushed completely out of the narrative.
They don't, though. States don't deal with airspace at all.
They never have. So why would you all of a sudden be good at it now? Right.
Yeah, and there's certain projects that can only be kind of run at the largest level, or there's benefits from having them run at that level because of the wider reaching kind of perspective on how things interrelate that you can't get on your, let's say, your local town, expecting them to understand airspace versus the federal government or the FAA.
They can't, and they won't, and they don't have the money to invest
the resources
in
just aren't there. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, I think another thing that kind of this pandemic has showed is that a lot of these states, especially right now, have no money. So, waiting on them is not really a strategy.
Yeah, they bank on the government to give them a lot of the assistance financially that they need to get their programs funded. So.
Yeah, another thing I found out that was interesting is, just kind of almost like a balancing act that the federal government does with funds that come from one state to make sure another state is supplied with certain resources and things for their own success. And we don't realize how interrelated we are until, something like this happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So any advice for somebody maybe in a different state, but it's trying to kind of put together a drone program at a government agency, or even something not as large and kind of comprehensive as you guys are working on in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but even just getting some sort of standardization in place at a government level? I guess, what challenges did you come across? What types of pushback? What can somebody in your shoes maybe expect?
So to answer your first question, I would advise those individuals or groups to wait a bit. Wait, because there are other places in the country where they're trying to develop. We're doing it. LA's doing it. North Carolina's doing it. South Dakota's doing things. Is it South Dakota or North Dakota? Which one is it?
The Dakotas.
One of the Dakotas. Syracuse, New York has a center of gravity. That's my hometown, by the way, so I love those folks.
Do you know Andy Thurling?
Who?
Andy Thurling?
No, I don't. So I don't know any of them, but I love them because they're helping develop Syracuse, which is muchly needed.
Yeah, they're doing a great job too.
Yeah, I visited with them last year, just as an aside, for the first time last year. So I met some of their players up there in New Air and some of those folks, but great group of people. But wait, because one of the main things that we wanted to come out of our program development is something that other regions can take and use. So we want to eventually develop a template, right, a programming template but we're currently trying to figure out what works first. So let us work the kinks out. Let other groups in the country work out the kinks, because they got investment, like places in LA, they got money that they've been spending. And Central New York, they got money they've been spending. Let them work out the kinks, but develop a relationship with these particular regions. Get keyed into their policymakers and the folks at the head of their organization, so you can, when that template's ready to go, you'll have access. Our public safety unmanned response team, that group, their template and their service, that's done. They have a lot of that done. If you need anybody needs connections and how to get their law enforcement program set up and some of the do's and don'ts, those guys and gals, they have it all figured out. That stuff is done.
Are there links to those resources?
Yeah. I think we have a COG website for the public safety unmanned response team where you can get some of that information. And
that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
We could also put those in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd love to get people exposure to that.
Okay. Yeah, but don't try to figure any of this stuff out on your own at this stage, because a lot of other groups have already figured it out, and most people in aviation are very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, there's definitely a strong passion in the community for both drones, but then broader aviation community. And like you said, let's not rebuild the wheel if we don't have to. Let's build off each other's progress. So,
yeah.
So what are you looking for, or what are your hopes for the near future, the rest of 2020 and into 2021?
Man, COVID has changed everything, right?
Yeah.
We, as an industry, I think you were headed this way, and there were so many things I think were about to happen, but now I think it's definitely pushed back quite a bit. So from an industry's perspective, I mean, this is what I've been telling our members, in particular the smaller businesses. We want you to be here when things open back up. So work on tightening up your business, work on remaining healthy until 2021, and then we can emerge out of this stronger. But in the future, I think UAM and air taxi is going to have to take the baton of the industry. I think they're in a position to probably push harder than most, because they're not waiting COVID isn't really affecting a lot of what they have to get done.
They're also more nascent, and there's more money, period, into those efforts. So yes. Yeah, one of the things with small UAS is they didn't have as much leverage, to actually get as much attention. So I think that actually kind of fed into a more of like, this is a nuisance that I have to deal with on a regulatory level, rather than this is a burgeoning new technology that if we invest in will be the future of aviation.
That's really good.
No, I agree. And that's why I've been pushing for, I think the first thing or obstacle we need to overcome is our cities have to use the platform openly and for the proper reasons for at least the small UAS part to take off. People need to see how the cities are using it. It needs to look like a smart city initiative.
Yeah, it's got to be like a fire truck, right? When somebody sees a fire truck or an ambulance or EMS specifically, like, you feel good that somebody thought all of that out, because one day your house might be the one on fire. And people don't have that feeling for drones yet, but they should.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And even more than that, have you ever watched the show Westworld?
Yeah.
So did you see the air taxis in there and the automated vehicles in there?
Oh, I didn't get to season 3. Sorry, it's on backlog.
They
But yeah, I heard they modeled them independently, and somehow they came up with like the same kind of air taxi frame.
It's amazing how they show what it's going to look like. I think more imagery like that, the Jetsons, that kind of, people need to reconnect with that imagery, because our cities haven't been very smart, right? No, really, They haven't been very smart. We need to get people more indoctrinated with what smart cities look like and the benefits. And I think drones are a heavy part of that.
I was watching, driving around the streets and seeing all the telephone poles down. And I mean, that's a piece of technology that's ridiculously old, right? It might be as good as it gets. I'm not making any comments on that, but I think people just take for granted how pervasive that is and how much it matters to their lives. And we're just nowhere near that level of mundaneness for drones. And that's actually the goal, is to get to a point where it's so mundane that the minute it's gone, you're like, what happened? What happened to my drones? They were doing all these things for me. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting. You're right. I think we do need as many kind of positive images of the future as possible. And actually, to that point, PSEG, who handles my electricity out here on Long Island, they started using drones in their advertisements, say that they were inspecting the lines.
There you go.
I don't think they actually are, but it's nicer to see they're investing maybe in a drone program and want to put that out to the public as we're moving things forward. This is a piece of technology that's helping us do that.
And it sounds like they were smart enough to inform the public probably before they started, which needs to happen.
Not after they started. Right. Here's what we're doing, by the way. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think it's an interesting opportunity for governments, law enforcement. I think people are calling for more transparency into government, especially into law enforcement right now. Anytime law enforcement is implementing another kind of piece of technology, I think they have a duty to provide some transparency with it. Who knows, maybe using drones will push them to be more transparent in the first place and really create a much more transparent kind of agency that instills more trust in the public. So maybe drones this new technology can help kind of catalyze some transparency at a government level. That's thinking about it from the completely optimistic perspective, but who knows? It's kind of an interesting time to even try to engage with a tool like this at a government level. So.
All right, CJ, we're heading up against the hard stop. We've got our meeting now.
Up now. Ernest, any final thoughts that you want to share with the InterDrone community, and how could people get in touch to learn a little bit more or to follow up with some of the work that you're doing?
Okay, I'm not good on final thoughts, but just your public continue to engage the layman on this topic. Talk to your family members on drones and the benefits of drones. Just continue to push that narrative. And for me, drones, I mean, I'm starting to look at it as a gateway to the other aviation careers and other aviation things. We need it all. We're going to need it all. I know we're seeing a lot of pilots getting laid off and things because of COVID, but those jobs will come back, and we'll still, as a country, we're gonna build back up our potential, and we're gonna need you folks to proliferate the drone markets and the drone careers. Software engineers are what the bells and air taxi manufacturers need. Avionics professionals and AMPs. We're going to need all you guys when air taxi industry comes aboard. Oh, and to the small drone business owners, don't despair. I know there are probably aren't a lot of opportunities for you out there today. But good thing to do in your community is get engaged with your cities. They're going to have use cases for drones, and they're not going to want to hire pilots. They're not going to want the liability on flying their own drone program. So they're going to look to folks like you to do some of these things. I just got a call from a gentleman from the city of Dallas, and they wanted to be able to look at solar panels on the top of a roof. They don't have a single drone pilot in their department.
Wow.
To do those type of inspections. So they engage with your cities. Let them know how much your services cost. I bet you're cheaper than their alternatives. And that's a way for you guys to grow your business during COVID. A lot of inspections can be done now because you're not flying over people, because a lot of instances there aren't people out because of COVID. Take advantage of that. You might even if you live in a small city and they don't know a lick about drones, educate them, market your services, and that'll help you stay afloat.
Great advice. Thank you so much, Ernest.
Thank you.
That was awesome. Well, thanks again for being here. This podcast will be on the InterDrone Launchpad. It'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever pods are casted. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks again for joining us, Ernest, and all the work you do. And we will see everybody next week.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.